So here we are, day one of the Louis Vuitton Challenger Selection Series. And for this opening day, we're at the Orient Express Racing Team's base. Why? 1, they invited us. 2, their base may be the furthest out of town, but they have the best vantage point in the harbour to see the teams head out. And 3, I'm also intrigued by this team. I've argued for some time that having been last in, this team has the least pressure on them. But they also have what we think could be one of the quickest boats. And that combination could well be a potent one. But of course, there's one other reason. The build up to the start happens over lunchtime. It's a French base, and just look at their hospitality area. I mean, come on. There's a lot of excitement, as you can imagine, around today. There will be at all of the teams around here. This is the first day of the Challenger Selection Series. This is when it really all kicks off. But there's particular excitement here because the bottom line is this is a young and very talented team, but they're the first to admit that they're actually the least experienced of everybody else. But what we've seen so far from this team, I'd argue, is extraordinary. If you look at the numbers of what happened in the preliminary race, sure, they didn't win as many races as they would have liked to, and yes, they made mistakes in the start area, in the start zone, but when you look at the mark roundings, they very rarely lost time. So the moral of the story from that is that if they can avoid making those mistakes early on, they could well be in the running. There's no mistaking what today means to the French team. And just to add the pressure on, they're first up as well. Their first match is the Swiss, and they race twice today, with the last match of the day against the Italians. If there wasn't enough tension around the opening race, the weather added another level by not turning up, at least not on time for the racing. But when it did, the start between the French and the Swiss was fascinating. The risk of foiling off the foils was huge for both, but that didn't stop the French from putting pressure on Alinghi and creating a split tack start. The Swiss tacked off to the right, the French headed out to the left. This was a move that gave the French the upper hand, crossing the Swiss by 100 metres and then 200 metres to round the top mark well ahead. On the downwind leg, Alinghi hitched a ride with a puff and pulled back over 100 metres out of the French. But come the next upwind leg, Orient Express Racing Team made another big gain, rounding 46 seconds ahead with over a half-kilometre lead. The distance between the two continued to stretch and shrink throughout the race, but the French delivered a great performance to finish with a healthy win in testing conditions. One race, 2 lessons. The French are a force to be reckoned with, and the Swiss are quick downwind. How nerve-wracking was that, given that it was at the lower end of the wind limit, you hadn't seen anybody else race? How stressful was it?
Yeah, those boats are not really easy to sail when it's pretty light, so yeah, you're right, it's pretty stressful for everyone on board. And we also have had a lot of restarts because the wind limit was below, the wind was below the limit, sorry. So yeah, I think overall we did pretty well, but for a new team like us, yeah, it's not really easy to handle the boat in those conditions.
Even though the breeze had picked up a little, neither team seemed to want to engage with the other in the pre-start. Both started on the button mid-line, but within seconds the Italians were putting pressure on the Kiwis, coming up from underneath to force them off to the right. The plan seemed to be working as Luna Rossa led around the first lap. But the big revelation came halfway up the second beat, as the Kiwis powered over the top of the Italians, although they didn't quite get to their breeze. They did get close enough to cause the Italians some stress though. Trying to defend their position, Luna Rossa tacked in the Kiwis' face, but skidding a bit on their foils cost them dearly, as the Kiwis came out of the tack with speed and height and climbed out from under Luna Rossa. This was an impressive biff on the nose in less than 60 seconds. It was almost as if the Kiwis had found the afterburner button and pressed it accidentally. It was as dramatic as that. In the end, Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli did well to finish just 12 seconds behind. Ironically, this is the kind of move that the challengers want to see the defender deliver. Knowing what you're going to be up against is the first stage in understanding how you're going to deal with it come the day.
Really fun race. Obviously you like to lead from the beginning, but we're really proud of the way we managed to make that pass and get a race win on the board.
It was as agonising for the Americans as it was unexpected for the British. Seeing American Magic dead in the water, off her foils and over the line at the start allowed Ineos Britannia a 700-metre lead at the first gate. How could the Americans come back from this?
The umpires, USA penalty, restart penalty.
The first sign that the breeze was dropping was the reduction in the leg lengths. The next was American Magic almost falling off her foils again. But by the bottom gate, they'd closed on the Brits by 20 seconds. In the end, Ineos completed their 3 laps of the racecourse in a flawless manner to take the win. But the big question was, given the big gains that the Americans had made at times, what would have happened if they hadn't have been OCS?
Very frustrating. We fell off the foils very early on. I think we probably didn't recognise enough when we passed the starboard end with like a minute and a half to go. We saw as little as 5.5, 6 knots of breeze, which is very difficult to manoeuvre with the sails we had up. So we did a good job of, I guess, getting through the spectator fleet and getting enough breeze to come back at the line, but we came back a little bit too early, and in the dying breeze we got below manoeuvre speed and didn't do the best job of staying on the foils. So that regard, very frustrating. We need to go back and have a good look at ourselves to see what we need to do better tomorrow. But after that, once we got up and running, it was really impressive how the team sailed the boat. In those conditions, when you're sailing through the dirt and you're struggling with very little breeze on such a small sail plan, it's hard to sail the boat, and the guys did a fantastic job of managing the platform and giving us the opportunity to keep fighting. And in the end, we're only a small mistake away from sneaking past. We kept the pressure on and we kept fighting till the end.
You had a 700-metre advantage right at the beginning, and they finished 14 seconds behind you, which is one hell of a gain, isn't it?
Yeah.
Were you surprised at that? Are you worried by that?
Not surprised. I mean, we know American Magic are a class team. They've got some really good pace at times. It was quite a tricky day in terms of the breeze, lots of puffs and lulls and shifts, and we kind of felt like we got ourselves in this sort of awkward position where we were quite a long way ahead, which made it hard to really hurt the other boat, but not far enough ahead that it was race done. And so I don't think we did a particularly good job of hooking up the wind shifts and pressure. We made a few boat handling errors, and I think those combined was really where you saw the gains for American Magic. They did a nice job, and we know that we've got to get faster and handle the boat better. But like I said, I think we're learning a lot about that and making some big gains at the moment.
Fired up by their success in the opening race, the French delivered another superb start at speed, on the line and heading out to the left. But Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli were having none of that and sat on their opponent all the way out to the boundary, tacked underneath them and then squeezed up to bounce the French off back to the left. It was a perfect move by Luna Rossa Prada Pirelli and defined the race. Their win wasn't without a little bit of drama though, as the Italians nearly tripped up in a jibe on the second downwind leg.
Lost the rudder. Nice and strong. Yes, I'm reconnected almost.
Safe?
Not yet.
Maybe go a little lower on ride.
Lily's on main.
A little lower on ride height, guys. Just a little trim down and bow up. Put the rudder on the water a little bit.
Yeah, got it back.
But in the end, they held it together and took a comfortable win. One day in, and while there were some great races and points on the board for teams that might not have been expecting them, everyone was playing it down. which is interesting in itself because while the Cup is a marathon, the race to stay in the running after the 8th of September feels much more like a sprint. Except that just as we were all settling down to think about what lay in store for tomorrow, there was drama ashore with the news that Emirates Team New Zealand had dropped their boat heavily in its cradle. As you'd expect, the news broke on social media, and that brought a crowd. Then came the statement from the team, which confirmed that there was an issue with the lift and the boat landed heavily onto its supporting cradle. It also said that the team will be assessing the situation overnight and that they would not be competing tomorrow. That leaves the Brits and the French with no one to play with. But what does it mean for the Kiwis? We don't know yet, but the potential for damage is there, given that the foil tips seem to be very close to the ground and the hull could well have suffered some damage. From a defender perspective, this is clearly a blow, but at least they've got the time to fix things. See you tomorrow.